Alright, hello everybody, this is Surreality or Polaris here, and here I'm doing a little tier list based off on current players in the North American region of Kurtzpel for Season 5. And this isn't like a traditional tier list, and I'll explain more in depth. As you can see, there's only 3 tiers, and the thing is, no tier is inherently better than the other. Outside of maybe Dark Horse, you could consider to actually be the worst tier out of this list, but in general, if you're on this list, it's because I think that you would be in that category of being in the best player. So regardless of where you are on this list, if you're on this list, you're in a category that I would be call the top players of the game in the North American region. So now there are a couple of people that I don't have on this list, mainly because I either can't find them on the leaderboard, they weren't really playing that much in this season, or I just don't know how they play in a competitive setting outside of just 2v2 ranked. So like if I saw you in KCL, I'd probably put you on here. If I saw you in any previous tournament in other seasons, then that will also be, or even customs. If I saw you in a custom as well, that would also help attribute to it. And so yeah, there's that. And now let me explain a little bit about what the 3 tiers mean. I kind of talked about what dark horses are, and dark horses are essentially people who I don't expect to beat the top players, or who most people wouldn't expect to beat other top players, but they sort of have proven that they can. And so because of that, that's why I'd put them in that tier. And also kind of just because I don't think that these people have quite reached their peak in the game yet. Like they definitely have a lot of potential to grow and potentially go into one of the 2 tiers above it. And then in terms of those 2 tiers, so we have the explosive tier and the consistent tier, and neither one of those is actually better than the other, but they're just 2 different categories. Explosive tier is for people who I think have really high highs and really low lows, because there's some people that are like kind of coin flippy, and they can really dominate a match, and then they can also just all of a sudden lose one day. Like they can even dominate multiple matches for a long ass time, and then just all of a sudden lose to people that you would never have expected them to lose to. So that's kind of what the explosive tier is for. Now, consistent are never truly dominant, or they aren't necessarily always dominant. Like they're consistent, their performance is pretty consistent. They win against certain people that you always expect them to win against. They lose against others that you expect them to lose against, and that's kind of just how it is. They never really get upset, and they don't really overly dominate somebody. Like if they beat another top player, it was probably a close game, because that's just how their play style is. They never really dominate at all. So first, let's start out with who I think are the dark horses. Now, actually, originally I had to redo this video because I left some people out, as well as I didn't really give an explanation for people. And there's a lot of people to go through, so I don't know how in-depth of an explanation I'll give for each one. But in general, I'll try to give a brief explanation for why I put them in the tiers. But first, let me put all the dark horses in. So first, we have Chris Angel, Indoxicom, Gengo, Kanani, Supreme, and this one's kind of for fun, but we'll just put Royal in there, since I did see him play during Season 5, and of course I've seen him play in tournaments a long time ago, but in theory, he should go into that category, in theory, but we'll get the explanation of that. So anyway, yeah, so actually let's start out there, since we're in dark horses and we already put them all in. So it is organized from left to right within each category, so left would be the best in that category, and right all the way to the right would be the worst. Of course, it's still the worst of the best, so it's still just the best, regardless of where you are. But yeah, so first we have Royal as the bottom of the dark horse category, or the dark horse tier. And that's just because he did pick up the game kind of more recently. He played a little bit with Bubbly, who you'll see later on in this tier list. And he wasn't starting out too good. He did get dominated pretty early on, and he kind of lost like a lot. But there were some times he was able to beat, I think, a few other top players in 2v2s. And of course, I have seen him perform well in tournaments before in previous seasons, so there is that. So in theory, he should be able to take games off of top players. It might take a little bit of work and dedication, but in theory he should be able to. He has the ability to, or he had the ability to, so therefore he should have the ability to now. But because I haven't really seen too much out of him, and I don't actually know if he's gonna really try to play the game that much anymore, even this season, I kind of have him at the bottom of the dark horse tier. But next up we have Supreme. So Supreme has sort of been on the rise in my opinion. He's gotten a lot better of a player. Still, a lot of times isn't quite able to defeat some of the top people. He can though, especially if he is duoed with a top player, he can totally take on other top player teams. So he is definitely a potential to, or has potential to kind of move up in the tier list and go to a separate tier. Kanani is kind of in the same boat, but I don't know. Kanani's weird. I think he hasn't reached his peak yet, but even if he has, his performance is still, he totally could take down a top player, and he has taken down top players before. But he still has a lot of weakness. Now, whether it be because he's on Wi-Fi and he kind of gets fucked by his internet, not too sure, but that is kind of the case. And that holds him back a lot from moving up into any of the 2 tiers above. And then next we have Gengo, who actually is a relatively new player compared to, like, Supreme and Gengo are probably the newest out of all the players in the Dark Horses tier, and Gengo's actually been doing really good recently. He's still learning a lot, I think, but he's making definitely a lot of improvements, and I can see him kind of turning into a player that goes into the consistent or explosive tier. Like, I can definitely see him moving up in his potential, so I'm interested to see where he goes. And then at the top of Dark Horse we have Indoxicom and Chris Angel, who are both kind of tied. I don't really, they'd both be at the top, but I wouldn't really put one above the other. I just had to though in this case. And both of them I think are really good. They're almost out of Dark Horse tier. Like, I would almost put them, like, I'd probably put Chris in explosive tier and then like Indoxicom in like consistent tier or something maybe. Yeah, it's very close for them. But I think what holds them back, well, at least what holds Chris back, is his connection, unfortunately, and being 3-bar, regardless of where he goes, which is unfortunate. And then Indoxicom, I think he just has a lot of potential. He does use Cannon, though, which is a harder class to use outside of... now, he does primarily use it in duos, which is where it shines the most, but I do feel like his Cannon is probably one of the best, but I don't think it is the best. So, and then outside of his cannon play, I don't think there's anything necessarily too remarkable outside of, again, that hammer play, or outside of the cannon play. So I think he would have to work on whatever his other karma is to try to get into one of the tiers above. But that's about it for Dark Horses. So let's move on to the explosive tier. So let's see. So I have Melville, Bubbly, Kaito, Lumi. Then we have Izeno, or Roade, or whatever you want to call him, Rashu, Palatreon, Wolfite, Crimson Avenger, Hot Pockets, and Ichizo. So this category, again, this is our first like real top tier category. Everybody in here are what I would consider actual top players of the game currently, in this case I do think that their performances kind of go up and down. A lot of them are kind of coin flippy. They can get dominated 1 second but then dominate the other, so like that's their performance. They can 7-0 one day and then get 7 or 0-7 by the same exact team the next day. Like, it's kind of crazy sometimes, and so that's what all this is. So again, we'll go from right to left. So first we have Ichizo, who I have at the bottom of the explosive tier. The reason for that is, to be all honest, it's his connection. He has like, I don't know, 1.5 second delay compared to like most other players in the game. So 90% of anything that he should be able to react to, he can't physically react to, and that holds him back a significant amount. However, outside that, he is really good at like knowing what to do and when to do it. It's just that not all the time that works, because when he knows to do something, he sometimes isn't given the time to be able to do it. So again, that's why he's like the biggest coin flip compared to like everybody. Like everybody might be a coin flip, but some of them are like kind of weighted coins that maybe go one way or the other. Ichizo is like a pure 50-50, like it either works or it doesn't, and you're not really too sure. So that's why I have him at the bottom of the explosive tier. And then next we have Hot Pockets. So Hot Pockets, I actually have seen him play in tournaments specifically. He did play in the Kurtzpel Community League. I don't know if he played in any tournaments outside of that, but their games were pretty good. However, there are quite a few games, especially in customs, I've seen it, or in a regular ranked, where Hot Pockets can do really well some matches, like really, really well. I've seen him beat other top players a decent amount, whether again it was in like a 1v1 or something like that, or 2v2. But I've also kind of seen him just like blatantly lose. And again, he also is kind of coin flippy. I would say he has potential to go into a consistent tier, depending on whether he really kind of evens out with his performance. But yeah, right now he kind of goes up and down, and I've heard stories about other players saying, oh, well, we farm him one day and then he kind of destroys us the next, which would more likely than not put them in the explosive tier, so that's why they're there. And then Wolfite and Crimson Avenger, I kind of just have them in here. I know that they don't play too much, though they have played a little bit in Season 5. And originally I actually had them in the consistent tier, but then after Wolfite even talked to me and expressed his own opinion that he feels like he should be more in the explosive tier now, because they kind of either get like they either destroy or they get destroyed, because if they get hit by something they never seen before, they're probably going to lose that match. So if you put them against anything new that they're not used to, then they're going to get destroyed because of that. So that's why I have them in the coin flip category. But of course, I still have them a little bit higher in that list because they are still pretty good. They haven't really lost too much. I mean, sometimes they're a little bit rusty, especially Crimson Avenger, I think, has more rejoined a little bit later, while Wolfite had more consistently tuned in every season. But I have seen them play before. Obviously, they showed a really dominant performance in ESL, and so that's why I have them in this explosive tier. And then actually ahead of that, we have Palatrion, who I think I've seen him really pop off. Like I've seen him, he's beaten me a couple times. I've seen him beat other people a couple times, especially in 1v1s or 2v2 customs and other stuff. Like he can do really well. But on the other hand, again, I've seen him get dominated by, I've seen people like really destroy him, especially even if he was in duos or in a custom or in a tournament, which actually he did partake in KCL as well for a couple seasons, and I think he's actually one of the league administrators. So I have seen him play in it, and he also has gotten destroyed in KCL as well. So that's why I kind of have him in coin flip. However, unlike Wolfite and Crimson, he does play a lot more. And so because of that, I would kind of give him the edge over them. And honestly, he's kind of in the middle of the explosive tier, just due to the fact that he plays a lot and is still kind of in the explosive tier. So again, I think that's where I put him. He's one that could potentially move though, whether it be up or down. So we'll see. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to move Hot Pockets. Sorry, I think I'm going to actually move Hot Pockets. Not in front of Palatrion, but like right there. Because I do think, I mean, Hot Pockets also plays a lot, so they play more than Wolfite and Crimson, so he's more used to certain things that they wouldn't be. So yeah, that's fine. And then next up we have Rashu. So Rashu, again, he is already a pretty good player. Biggest thing that holds him back, that makes him a coin flip, is the fact that he's like constantly 3-bar. Maybe even less if he's on East Coast, which basically means that things that should be reactable are essentially unreactable. However, the reason he's higher than Ichizo is because in general he kind of knows this, and he's been able to kind of work around it, and he has been able to actually dominate other top teams, especially in KCL or ESL. He has been able to actually pull through quite a bit. And so that's why I kind of have him in the explosive tier list, but of course he is still held back by his connection, which is why I kind of also have him in the middle, not quite as high as everybody else, who in fact everybody else who's higher than him essentially just has a better connection, which is kind of why they're higher. So there's that. So next we have Izeno or Roate. So he is again another pretty good double breaker player, as well as he now kind of plays breaker slayer. And he also I put in the explosive tier list mainly because there are certain matchups where he just kind of wins, and then other ones where he kind of just loses. Like there are certain combos that he just can't go against at all, or certain people that he just has really bad matchups with, and sometimes he can beat them, of course, because that's the idea of a coin flip. But sometimes he can, but he also just has like really bad days and really good days, and yeah, he's kind of just all over the place. But he has, again, he's dominated people as well before, so that's kind of why I have him in the coin flip. And of course, he has a better connection than Rashu, so that's why I would put him above Rashu, because he can actually react to things and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's why I'd put him in there. And then next up we have Lumi. So Lumi plays a lot with Bubbly, obviously, and they're a pretty explosive duo. However, again, they both, I guess I can actually talk about Bubbly and Lumi being here. The reason that they're both in explosive tier is that essentially their team can dominate. Again, like I've mentioned multiple times, these teams or players can really change the tide of the battle and have an insane performance. But I've also seen them lose like really badly before. Now, whether it was them just joking around or just not playing well that day, like I've seen it happen, and that's kind of why I have them both there. And then I have Kaito a little bit higher than Lumi, just because I've seen Kaito pop off just slightly more than Lumi, and Kaito also is kind of in that explosive tier where, again, especially Kaito with Little Saber, I've seen them like 7-0 people, but then also get 7-0'd, so, or 0-7'd, so, you know, and if you're wondering why Little Saber's not on here, it's because I can't find him on the leaderboard, and I haven't seen him play this season, so that's the only reason I don't have him on here. But if I did, he'd probably be right next to Kaito in the explosive tier. Probably not above Bubbly, but right between Bubbly and Lumi as well. And of course, again, Kaito does use controller, which does hold him back from being the top of the explosive tier as well. So I already mentioned Bubbly, who I just think has a slightly more better performance than, well, not slightly, he does have like a decent amount better performance than all the other people in the explosive tier list. However, he is double breaker, and so unlike Mellowville, who's in the front of the explosive tier, his explosivity, if that was a word, maybe it is kind of limited by that. So he can really pop off, but he's only double breaker, so it's not too bad if you get caught by him. Like there's a good chance you can be peeled or something, and you'll take a little less damage than you would have if it was like Mellowville. Which, yeah, so Mellowville is the top because when he plays Witch and when he goes Witch ult 2, he is basically unstoppable. Of course, at the same time, I've seen him activate Witch ult 2 and then get completely destroyed in the next 2 seconds, but again, that's the idea of him being in the explosive tier list. He is basically a person who will either kill you very fast or you will kill him very fast, is usually how it goes. So that's kind of why he's at the top of the explosive tier list. Also just because he performs better than most of the other people in this tier, or has proven to perform better than most of the other people in this tier list. Specifically in regards to KCL, he's won both seasons of it, and so he has sort of proven his dominance in the more recent metas. So now we have the consistent tier. So consistent tier, I have looking like this. Alright, so at the bottom of consistent tier we have Faith, who I actually don't know how much Faith has played this season. I think I saw him stream a couple times season 5, but his playstyle honestly I don't think has changed too much. The way he fights I think has remained very much the same. He uses primarily the same karmas. I don't think he's really changed. You can even see, well, maybe you can't see in his own image, but in his image he uses Fist Sword, which I think he's used for like a long time. I think there might have been one time where he used DS maybe as well, but he's almost always just used Fist and Sword. I think that's what he's primarily used, and so his karmas never really have changed. and his playstyle has been usually pretty consistent. Again, the reason he's at the bottom is because unfortunately, due to the fact that he doesn't play that much, he does end up kind of losing out against a lot of players, but that's kind of something I expect when I watch him. I expect him to beat certain players and I expect him to lose against others because he's just not used to it, which you would think would then put him in coin flip, but it's not like his performance changes at all. Like he doesn't necessarily get completely dominated when something he doesn't expect goes his way. Like he can kind of adapt, he can just figure it out. It doesn't mean he'll win, but it means that he'll at least make a close game. But again, of course, he doesn't play that much, so that's why I have him at the bottom of the consistent tier. Although he is liable for going into the explosive tier, depending on how well his adaptability does end up being when he gets hit by new stuff. Then we have Yeno. So Yeno I also have at the bottom of consistent tier because she does play a lot more than Faith for one. And also, like, I just know who she wins against and who she loses against. Like, her performance has been pretty consistent throughout the lifespan of this game. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, she doesn't really surprise me too much in what she does. So, when I see her beat this player, again, it's like, okay, that makes sense. When I see her lose, it's like, yeah, that probably makes sense. There's never really any upsets. She doesn't necessarily have crazy dominance over players. Of course, that being said, she has beaten other top players before plenty of times, especially when duoed with another top player. And so that's why she is in the consistent tier list, because again, she is a top player. She can and has beaten almost everybody on this top tier list, and it's just that her performance individually maybe doesn't quite pull through as much as she does in a duo, which is why she's more at the bottom of the consistent tier list. Also, her connection holds her back. Again, West Coast. Hate to see it. So next up we have Zedam and Yako. The reason I have them both together is actually I knew that they would be in the consistent tier list, but I didn't really know exactly where. And honestly, Yako's one, I'm not actually too sure if I'd put him in explosive or consistent. Zedam, I'm pretty determined, or I'm pretty okay with putting him in consistent tier. I think Zedam's performance has been mostly the same. He doesn't really change his karmas that much either, and so he basically has the same play style, or just mostly plays the same, and he wins against certain people, loses against others. Nothing is really too surprising from him, but he does have a better connection than Yeno, and I think just does play a little bit better than Yeno. And same thing for Yako. I think Yako and Zedam both play pretty well, not quite as high as some of the other people on the consistent tier list, but like still well enough to be considered a top player. So that's kind of why I have them there. But they have potential, again, to move around the tier list, either up or down or into another category. So it's definitely possible. And then next we have Mr. Naylicious, who's right here. And so Naylicious is, well, he primarily solo queues for one, so he doesn't really have that duo experience, which if he did have duo experience, well, I guess he did play with Kitsu, but also I don't have Kitsu on the list because I haven't really seen him play that much in Season 5. But if Nay was more dedicated with his duo Kitsu, he'd probably be a little higher on the list. But by himself, he is a pretty consistent player. Usually I expect him to win against certain people, lose against others, again, like all the other people, inconsistent. However, I do think his performance is puts him kind of in the middle of the consistent tier list. I think he does better than the people below him, but maybe not quite as good as the people above him. And so that's kind of just why I have him in there. There isn't too much of another explanation to it. I guess also his karmas are basically always the same. I know he did do a live stream, I think, as of I'm recording this, where he's like having people request for him to do other karma combinations, but in general he plays Fist DS. That is usually what he plays. And then we have Yozora, who I also do think is in the consistent tier. Again, Yozora doesn't really show off any dominance a lot of times, and he doesn't really lose too heavily all the time, although I have seen it happen a couple times in some scenarios, but we won't talk about those. But in general, especially when he's in a duo, he has a pretty consistent performance. He has a plan when he plays, and he tries to execute that plan. If that plan doesn't work, again, he might turn into disadvantage and then he might end up losing. And so I would say he's beaten basically everybody on this tier list as much as he's lost against everybody on this tier list. So that kind of puts him in the middle of the consistent tier list because he basically, again, he's won against everybody and loses against anybody. He's never dominated against anybody that really, or realistically, in this tier list. So that's kind of why I have him there. And of course, he is more adaptable with his karmas. He does play a little bit more, but still relatively regulated, primarily playing hammer, sword, and witch. So that's also why I kind of have him there. And of course, I think he performs a little bit better than the people below him and a little bit worse than the people above him. So that's why I put him there. And then next we have Dragon. And the reason I have a Dragon here, so first of all, he is West Coast, so that is a little bit of disadvantage. He's going to be 3-barring or 4-barring against East, which is going to be primary Q. But I've seen Dragon really pop off, especially in tournaments, more so in ESL and tournaments prior to that. He did really well. And in general, I think his Witch is something that is more, probably one of the more powerful Witches in the game. I don't think it's quite as explosive as Melleville's, but it is definitely, I think, more on the consistent side. Like his Witch is usually pretty consistent, I would imagine, outside of the fact that sometimes the skills don't work, but that's not really his fault. But in general, his Witch is pretty good, and again, I think he is better than the people below him on the consistent tier, but a little bit worse than the people above him. Again, I think his playstyle has been pretty consistent throughout his lifespan of playing the game. So, yeah, there's that. And then Numza, kind of in the same boat as Dragon, to be honest, except Numza has a better connection to East Coast, and so because of that, just performs better. So that's basically the only reason why Numza is higher on that list. I would also say he has one of the best witches in the game as well, potentially better than Dragon, specifically because, again, Numza can do more because he has better connection to East, so that would be about it. And then we have, I kind of put myself there, but I don't even know. I kind of just want to skip over myself, but I did put myself in consistent tier because I don't think, usually my playstyle is pretty consistent. I don't usually dominate that much over other people in this tier, and usually the games are just pretty close. However, I have helped win. Well, for one, I helped Melleville win second season of KCL, and in general, I think my performance is pretty decent. I might move myself down in the consistent tier though, or maybe even move to the explosive, depending on how I feel my playstyle ends up being in the future. But I don't know. I just kind of put myself in there. Melleville thought it was fine that I put myself at that rank, so I don't know. Maybe I'm being too humble about it. I have no idea, but I could see myself moving, probably not up, but maybe down the tier list. So I don't know. But let's move on to Rakoa, who's next. So Rakoa is probably in line to be one of the best double breakers in the game, probably next to Bubbly, and even Sayuka. Both Rakoa has really good performance, I guess would make sense to say. He helped Melleville win the first KCL. Although, to be honest, the only thing that holds him back is the fact that his connection, although I think it has improved, his connection has been notorious for being really bad. But despite that, has been able to pop off, having a really good performance against most of the other people in this list. Like, honestly, having really one of the only positive ratios against all the people in this list in terms of win to losses. And so because of that, that's kind of why I have him there. But of course, at the top of the tier list, we have Sayuka in the consistent tier. And now, the only thing I think, or the reason I put Sayuka at the top, for one, he just performs really well, regardless of whether he's solo queuing or duo queuing or trios queuing. He does really well. He's pretty consistent. I don't think, sometimes he does pop off every now and then, but I don't think he's had an extremely dominant performance at any given time. At least not as dominant as the people who are in the explosive tier. And of course, he also does do customs, in which case he has a lot of close matches with people. But in general, he does perform better than almost everybody in this list. Like he's also another person who I think has a majority positive ratio against everybody else in this list. Uh, Outside of maybe a few people in the explosive tier who, again, can kind of dominate or lose. But in general, I think Seiko is probably the best of the consistent players. Again, he also plays double breaker. He doesn't really venture too much out of that territory, although he does play other karmas. Or I've seen him play other karmas, but in general, I think his performance and playstyle does put him at the top of the consistent tier. And so that is about it for this tier list. I know it's a little long. Actually, now that I'm looking at the timer, it is way too long. But it's whatever. If you have any questions, I'd love to know your thoughts as well on the tier list. Leave something in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Yep, bye.